Hi friends, this is Angelica. Thanks for joining me here on the Greeteries YouTube channel. Today we're going to be looking at a few new products in the new Garden Party collection, which will be coming to the Greetery shop this Friday, June 14. We have a lot to get through, so let's get started. The first two products we'll be working with is Pours Tea die and Pours Tea stencil. The stencil packaging does have illustrations on the back to show what the stencil does, and there are lines on the stencil for the coordinating teapot and lid. I've already die cut white cardstock with the Pours Tea die, and this first teapot I inked with salvage patina first, and now I have the stencil over it and I'm using peacock feathers to add all of the details. Each teapot has a slit at the top of the pot, and which makes it easy to slide the lids into the teapot. So this next lid that goes with the teapot, I just inked. I forgot to add the salvage patina first, and that is totally fine. I'm just going to quickly add that ink right now and then move on to the next teapot. I am working on my Waffle Flower Stamps grip mat. This is what's holding my stencil and the die cuts in place. It has a nice grip to it. This teapot is the largest in the set. And when you're running the dies through your die cut machine, the dies are going to emboss lines or dotted lines into the teapots. So this particular one has curved dotted lines on the front, and I just think it's so charming. When I inked the pot with my Distress Oxide ink, it just seemed to emphasize those dots. So this pot I used saltwater taffy and abandoned coral. Now we're going to move on to the last pot, and this is the smallest one in the set. I think this shape is so adorable. I started with Tattered Rose, and then the color I'm using over the stencil is Victorian Velvet. And again, you can just see how easy it is to use this stencil, line it with the die cuts, and it took me no time to get these teapots done. So now we're going to move on to the next product. This is the A2 Stitched Scallops die, and there is a coordinating stencil. This is the Scalloped Gingham stencil. This stencil is going to bring color to your A2 scallop die cuts. Now the stencil set consists of gingham scallop mats in 3 sizes, and each size is going to have 3 stencils in it. So you have 2 for your gingham pattern, and then 1 stencil is to color in the scallop. So before we get into stenciling, I'm going to show you the size of these die cuts. This is the largest and the second size, and then the cute little small scalloped die cut. Scallop stencil has 3 pieces to it. I did snip the larger piece out of the stencil, and I'm going to not use the rest of the stencil. I'm just going to use this large piece. I'm going to tape it down first so I can ink the scalloped areas of this die cut. So I'm using salvage patina, and I'm just quickly going over that stencil. I am holding the stencil in place even though I do have it taped down. I just do not want that stencil to move at all. You can also put tape under this mask. I would not recommend spraying it with pixie spray. That's just going to leave too much adhesive on your panel, and the stencil really is just easy to tape in place. And I just worked my way around to the tape and then took the tape off and just finished those little areas where the tape was. Now I have this cute little frame with an inked scalloped edge. Now we're going to move on to the gingham part, and I'm starting with the first stencil. Again, I did not spray the back of this stencil either, even though those lines will move if you're not gentle. So I'm just going up and down and not really using a circular motion so that those lines do not move. I'm using scattered straw for the color. This is just a really soft, buttery yellow. I love it. It looks fantastic next to the salvage patina. Now I'm going to use the last stencil to finish off this gingham pattern, and you see I was holding the lines in place a little bit because since I'm inking over the first set of lines, I did do a small amount of circular motion. So I just held those lines in place using my hands. The next set of products that we're going to look at is the Brew-tea-ful Day stamp set. Now, this stamp set has lots of fun sentiments in it and a flower bouquet. There is a coordinating die for the sentiments and a coordinating die for the bouquet. I've already used the die for the bouquet, ran it through my die cut machine with white cardstock, and now I'm going to use my MISTI to stamp this bouquet. I have the negative in place in my MISTI. It is being held by a waffle flower grip mat. And now I'm going to stamp with Distress Oxide inks. I know it's a little shocking I'm using these inks, but I started with Twisted Citron, and then I'm just going to add a little bit of Mowed Lawn, so there is some interest, some color interest. Now I have the blooms in place, and I'm going to stamp them a couple times with Tumbled Glass. And this bloom stamp is one piece, and if you are putting the small blooms, because there is another die, there's two dies in this set. The first die just die cuts the bouquet, and then the second die cuts all of the blooms. Now, if you put all of the blooms in their negative, the stamp fits perfectly over the blooms, so that's what I did to keep all the pieces together. I use saltwater taffy on the blooms, and again I'm going to stamp them a couple times, and then I'm going to use the last stamp for the flower bouquets, and that's just going to add a little bit of detail to the blooms. So on top of the blue I'm using Salty Ocean, and I'll stamp twice. I'm using my finger sponge or my sponge dauber to add that ink and spread it out evenly. And for the pink flowers, I'm using Lumberjack Plaid. Now the stamping is done. The little flowers do come in clusters. Some of them come in clusters. So I'm cutting them apart because I want the larger blooms to be one color and the smaller blooms to be the second color. So some of these smaller dies do have large and small blooms together, so I'm snipping the larger blooms apart, and I did stamp a second bouquet off screen, so I have two bouquets to work with. So I'm just going to quickly glue all the pieces together, and then we're going to move on to the next step. I'm making two cards, so I'm going to need two backgrounds, and I'm using the Aida cloth texture plate just to bring a little bit of texture to the background. So I've attached that to a card base, and then I've attached the second largest gingham die cut to the card base, and now I'm figuring out where I want my teapot. I am going to put the bouquet behind the teapot. Now this is the largest scallop die cut, and I'm actually going to add it to the card base sideways, and that way there's white peeking on the top and on the bottom. Once I have that on the panel, and I did use thin foam squares to attach that panel so there's a little bit of height to it, I trimmed the edges. And then off screen, I stamped out a couple sentiments and used the coordinating dies to die cut them. I'm going to stick them right on top of the pots and then assemble the cards. So I have some small, thin foam squares behind the bouquet just to give the bouquet a little bit of lift, as does the teapot. There are thin foam squares holding that to the card base also. And I should mention that these sentiments came from Brew-tea-ful Day stamp set. So I'm almost done assembling this. I'm just going to put the last card together off screen, and that's going to finish these cards and this video. You'll find more information on these products as well as the rest of the release over on the Greeteries blog. There is tons of inspiration and ideas being shared, so be sure to head over there. These products will be in the shop this Friday, June 14 at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. That is all that I have for today. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. Take care, friends.